Today we will look at a short sutta, short but very instructive sutta in SD 46.10, the Chatuka Dharma Katika Sutta. Okay, now please look at the top right hand corner of page 16. This is the sutta title heading, which is very important. You either remember the sutta name or the sutta number, which is A4.139. Okay, you can see just below Anguttara, the Book of Four, Sutta 139. Now, in this case, we also have a kind of a reprise, a repeat of the sutta in Pugala Panyati, the Book of Four, Sutta 7. The Pugala Panyati, interestingly, is actually an Abhidhamma work. But here it's very similar to Anguttara in the sense that it deals with different kinds of people. So here, 4 kinds of people. All right. Then the same line, you have the translation of the title, the Fourth Discourse on the Dharma Speaker. Now, first you see the brackets, Chatuka. Chatu means 4. So Chatuka means the 4 sets of 4 quartets. So the reason why it is in brackets is because it was not there. I've added it in to make this title unique, because the title Dhamma Katika Sutta, there are other suttas of the same title. This is one of the problems in Pali suttas. Sometimes the first problem is not knowing the sutta at all. I mean, someone goes for a talk and he wants to know where the sutta comes from, and he comes to me, he asks, okay, do you know the sutta? And the Buddha said something. It's quite difficult to identify the sutta. Sometimes he knows the name, okay, let's say Dhammakatika. Then you have to find out which one. There are a number of them. Dhammakatika means Dhamma speaker. Sutta means thread, meaning the teaching that connects us right back to the Buddha's time. Right, so Chatuka here is to make it unique. It means the Dhammakatika Sutta in the Book of Fours of the Anguttara, that is the 4th Nikaya. And if someone asks you, what is this sutta about? Then you have a theme. Then the next line, third line, it's about the 4 kinds of Dhamma speakers and their respective audiences. Okay, so there you are. Just kind of give you a quick look. It also helps in the indexing and so on. After 15 years of translation and 10,000 pages, it's quite a lot of things. I have an index, I have different kinds of indexes, I have tables of contents. All these are very important for us to locate where the teachings are. Of course, nothing beats reading the sutta itself. So we have here quite a long introduction. Right, the sutta is very short, it's less than a page. Now we have about 8 pages of commentary, if you like. Now 8 pages of commentary is quite short because in the latest volume 54, I'm translating verses from the Sangyutta chapter 1. They're all, sets of 1 verse, 2 verses, 3 verses. The first one, there's only 1 sutta. I think I ended up writing a commentary 20 pages on just that 1 verse alone. So because some of these verses, they're very compact. The Buddha just says something, but you see the Deva comes along and tells the Buddha a verse. Okay, and then the Buddha replies. Okay, what the Buddha did was he repeats the whole verse. So this verse represents an old idea, the old school, if you like, the teachings before Buddhism, pre-Buddhist teachings. So Buddha will repeat everything and then he just changes 1 line on it. For example, in the case of the first verse, this deva or this deity comes along, tells the Buddha, life is very short, time flies. So it is good to make merit, So that's the idea, the old idea, to make merit. But we know in Buddhist teachings, merit is good, yes, but it gives you blessings of happiness, a good life, but then it keeps you within the karmic loop, within samsara. You move on and on. And as long as you are caught in samsara in this world, Mara is very happy with you, okay? So the Buddha repeats all the whole verse, then he changes the last line. He says, okay, life is short and so on. Therefore, you should let go of all attachments to the world. So that's the verse I have to comment on, because there's a lot of things to talk about. What does the Buddha mean by that? What does he mean by world? What does he mean by renounce? How do you renounce? Because people have the idea renounce means to be a monk or to be a nun, but you have various aspects of renunciation. For example, you have renunciation of body, renunciation of thoughts, and then spiritual renunciation. So all these need to be understood. So we call that reflection. So in a way, the commentary here, the modern commentaries, are a reflection on the sutta. So here we have the traditional commentaries, we also have the modern commentaries, and we also have scholarly explanations. Everything we try to put into one where possible. Now today's sutta is quite instructive. As you know, in the Anguttara, the suttas are very terse, they're very short. The Buddha will say something in sets, 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on up to 11. And not much is said, because remember, Anguttara is the fourth of the 5 Nikayas. So it is assumed that you already know some things from at least the Sangyutta Nikaya, the one before this, and maybe from the Majjhima. The Digha Nikaya, which is the first one, the long sayings, that is more stories, impressive records, it's like an encyclopedia. So the first volume doesn't have much practice. It's very interesting from the social point of view, historical point of view, even doctrinal point of view. But from practice point of view, the Sangyutta Nikaya is usually the best place to start. Anyway, for lay people normally, the monks would take teachings from the Anguttara, because they are simple, they come in lists, so it's easy to remember, like today's teaching. So on page 121, you have the translation, 121, Chatuka Dhamma Katika Sutta, the fourth discourse on the Dharma speaker. Bhikshus, there are these 4 kinds of Dharma speakers. What are the 4? So, as usual, the teaching in the Anguttara normally starts off with a question, and there are paragraph numbers there. Here again, we have a bit of a problem, because translating into English is quite new, with hardly a century. I think we can say it started in the 19th century, it's about 1 century. So the editors were not very systematic in numbering the paragraphs. So sometimes I have to renumber the paragraphs myself, so that it's easier for us. This paragraphing is very important to a class like this. Let's say a teacher wants to explain. You say, okay, let's look at paragraph 2, so it's easier, rather than saying so many lines down and so on. Right? So here we see the Buddha starting off by asking a question. And that's a kind of thesis also. He's saying, okay, there are these 4 kinds of people, and then he lists them. Okay? Then it's up to the teacher to explain what each of these items mean. Okay? All right, so then the Buddha begins his answer. Here, bhikshus, a certain Dharma speaker says little but what is unbeneficial, and his congregation is unskilled in discerning what is beneficial and what is not. All right? So here we have one category, one situation here. So it's not just about the speaker, it's also about the audience. And notice here, what I've done is I've translated it in such a way that is easy on our eyes. we belong to what's called the scribal tradition. We are a reading culture. Whereas the Buddha's time, the people belong to an oral tradition. They don't read. Writing existed, but it is not used in religion because it's regarded as something secular. And if you want to learn something, you go to a teacher, you listen. Listening is the most important experience you need in spiritual training in the Buddha's time. So there's a lot of repetition. So you listen. If you miss something, then the repetition will help you to catch up. Now my problem is, how do I present this repetitive text in such a way that's easy on our eyes as followers, as people who follow a scribal or reading tradition? So one way is to rearrange the words in such a way that your eyes will naturally follow the flow of the words, right? So, and then I separate the words maybe into columns or paragraphing and so on to highlight the key word and also to show you where the repetition is. Now the highlighted hierarchy is first is the dark bolding. That's the most important word, keyword. Then the underlining follows up. Underlining normally will explain the bold words. And then when they are repeated, I will use italicized words. So they follow that kind of sequence. When you use this text regularly, you will see that kind of convention. All right, so the Buddha says that there is this Dharma teacher. He doesn't speak much, but it's also not something very useful. And the audience also is not very good in discerning what's right, what's wrong. So here we have a worst case scenario, in other words, right? So what the Buddha is saying, this kind of situation does exist, all right? So when this is spoken to a class, then of course the more intelligent people will say, wow, okay, yeah, I'm familiar with this, so looks like I was right, we should not take a study like this, we should be more serious, we should study ourselves, things like that. So this is to help us be aware of the teaching environment, in other words, how we teach, how the audience should behave, and so on and so forth, all right? Now look at number 2 now. Bhikshus. Okay, this word bhikshu is, I like to use anglicized words of Pali and Sanskrit. The Pali word is bhikkhu, Sanskrit is bhikshu. Bhikshu sounds more English, if you like, and it's also anglicized. Usually translated as monk, which also can be used. Here I was thinking of a word that would at once connect you to the idea of a Buddhist monk. So instead of saying Buddhist monk, I use the word bhikshu. But then in bhikshu as a vocative, in other words, it's a calling word, addressing word. But when it becomes a noun, a normal kind of nominative, then I will use the word monk, nun, and so on. All these things, you'll get used to them as you read this text. Bhikshus with such a Dharma speaker is reckoned a Dharma speaker for just a congregation or an assembly. All right, so what we have here is the Buddha is commenting. It says, well, in this case, it's just for the talk. There's not much benefit there, okay? Now look at number 2, which is section 3 now. But here. So you can see these are cues, okay? But, and so on. You can see the moment you see this word, you know it's a cue for a new idea. But here, bhikshus, a certain Dharma speaker, says little, but what is beneficial? His congregation is skilled in discerning. All right, so you have quite a good situation here. Dharma speaker, the teacher doesn't say much, but whatever he says are useful, helpful, and the audience are also discerning, intelligent, they pay attention and so on. So this is quite a good kind of class. So by now we can say that, okay, what the Buddha is saying, it's okay, you just speak a little, not much, but it is useful and the class is attentive. Bhikshus, notice the 3.2 is in italicized, it means everything is repeated. Bhikshus, such a Dharma speaker is reckoned a Dharma speaker for just a congregation. Right here again, the Buddha is saying, well, it's good, but not good enough. Okay, you only benefit that group, perhaps. Okay, now we come to third brackets 3, which is actually number 4. But here, bhikshus, a certain Dharma speaker says much, but what is unbeneficial? His congregation is unskilled in discerning what is beneficial and what is not. All right. So here you don't have a very positive situation. All right. And again, here the Buddha say, well, in this case, bhikshus, such a Dharma speaker is reckoned a Dharma speaker for just such a congregation. In other words, he's just speaking for that group, and that's about it. And of course, usually the last one is the best. Right? So here we have number 5, which is section brackets 4. But here, bhikshus, a certain Dharma speaker says much, but what is beneficial? And his congregation is skilled in discerning what is beneficial and what is not. Bhikshus, such a Dharma speaker is reckoned a Dharma speaker for just such a congregation. Right? So in this case, he's good even for this particular group. These bhikshus are the 4 kinds of Dharma speakers. Now, if you look at this list, you can actually have at least 2 more categories if you like. Okay, but here the Buddha thinks that this 4 are quite enough. You can have, for example, one more where the speaker doesn't speak something beneficial, but the audience is skillful, possible too. But the Buddha is not trying to make it complete, it's just highlighting some very common situations when we teach the Dharma. So here, what the Buddha is saying, the Dharma speaker should prepare well for the talk, try to explain in some useful detail, and the audience also should be prepared, should understand what's going on. And there are many other suttas where the Buddha actually teaches us as an audience on how to appreciate the Dharma, for example. So in that sense, you can see Buddhism as an educative teaching, right? So in other words, how to teach, how to learn, and these are very important aspects of Buddhist training. In fact, when we talk about Buddhism, we often see it as a path. A path means you have to journey on it. To journey means you have to make this effort, and journey means you have to make your own effort. I mean, you may take a vehicle, but you still must make the effort to get the ticket, get the right time, and right bus, and so on. And then you have to journey. You have to know where to get down, when to get down. So the idea of the path also means progress, and we speak of Buddhist training as the 3 trainings. The Eightfold Path has 3 aspects. Sometimes they are spoken of 3 stages, but actually it's better to see them as 3 aspects, or 3 lanes, if you like. 3 kind of corridors for traveling, or like you have this wire with 3, this cord with 3 wires inside, and they all kind of the current runs concurrently. Take, for example, the 3 trainings. First training is training in moral virtue, where we discipline our speech, our body and speech, keeping the 5 precepts. This is to restrain our senses so that we don't break the precepts. The idea of keeping the precepts is partly a social aspect of Buddhism, to encourage a harmonious society. The precepts are about how we relate to other people. So if you keep the 5 precepts well, then you have this society which is harmonious and peaceful in their actions and their speech. If you look at the precept, the first three precepts against killing, against stealing, against sexual misconduct, they deal with the body. And the fourth precept deals with speech. The fifth precept is not to get drunk, because if you're drunk, you'll break all the other precepts. So we need to keep precept because there are other people. That's one simple reason. So the precepts is to have this wholesome environment, peaceful, quiet, so we can sit down quietly to meditate. And that's the second training. The training in samadhi. Okay, samadhi here refers to mindfulness, as well as deeper meditation, jhanas. We can simply call this second training mental training, if you like. So, based on moral virtue, the first part of the path, we build up this practice of calming and clearing the mind. Okay? I like to use two words here normally nowadays when in my translation, I use the word mindfulness and meditation. Not everybody can meditate. Meditate, you got to sit and kind of spend some time very calm, not doing anything. It's the best way you can calm your mind. If you are too busy or you have difficulty doing that, then you can do a simpler version of that. It's called mindfulness. For example, reflection on impermanence is a mindfulness practice. You constantly reflect on impermanence, then your mind kind of is prepared. Whatever happens, you say, well, it will pass, it is impermanent. A note on the word mindfulness. Now, here I'm using all these terms as used in the suttas, which can be said to go back to the Buddha's time. But in the scholarly world, in the world outside, if you like, they have their own conventions. For example, in psychology, during the first wave, they used the word meditation. People were not too sure what it is. And then they started talking about Buddhist meditation. And then they thought, oh, this word meditation is too religious. So now the so-called third wave, I'm told that they like to use the word mindfulness. So, but basically what they do is the same, they meditate, okay? But instead of using the word meditation, they use the word mindfulness, all right? But when, in my talks and in my translation, mindfulness is mindfulness, meditation is meditation. There are two different categories. They're very clear in Pali. Mindfulness is sati. Sati has to do with memory. Sati has to do with keeping your mind calm and clear, so you have good memory. You are able to understand and remember the teaching, practice it. Meditation is bhavana. Okay? Bhavana means to cultivate. So bhavana, you go a little deeper. Right? And bhavana is a beautiful word, right? So we cannot change it. We should not modernize these kind of terms. Then you're going to water down the Dharma, and you're going to throw the baby out with the wash water. So there is a difference between mindfulness and meditation, and we should kind of be aware of that. Of course, there's nothing wrong. In the world outside, people understand mindfulness better as a fashionable word for meditation. It's fine to use the word. But as they go deeper into Buddhism, you find you will naturally need to get the terms right as far as the suttas go. All right, so you can see, although we are talking about the Dhammakartika, Dhammatisha, there's quite a lot of other related things here. Right? So do read the sutta and also the commentaries for a better idea of what the Buddha is saying here. Let us close with a short reflection. Today we have studied on the Buddha's teaching on how to conduct ourselves in such a way as to present the Dhamma in truth and in beauty, so that we inspire people to want to know the Dhamma for themselves, and that we too want to continue knowing the Dhamma, to build this inner peace, so that we are heading in the right way towards awakening in time, even in this life itself. These are beautiful understanding and practice by this teaching, by this truth. May May we be blessed with good health, peace of mind, wisdom, and the courage to aspire to at least stream winning in this life itself. May our relatives and family and friends to be well and happy. May those who are practicing the Dharma to be well and happy, that they may attain the fruit of awakening in this life itself. And may those who have difficulty with the teachings or lost their way to find their way to the true path in this life itself. May all beings be well and happy. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.